Hi guys, I'm Pietra and this is the 5th episode of our podcast.
I'm Diane.
And I'm Giovanna.
And my name's Andy Ross, and I'm from the United States.
Andy is here to talk about how to study abroad as an international student.
And I want to start off with just saying thank you for having me. It is wonderful that I've spent time at Penn Life. You are a wonderful school. I've been here since the first day, even before you opened. So thank you for having me to this podcast too.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So who wants to start?
I can start. Can you tell us a little bit about the hospitality of American universities towards foreigners and international students?
You know, this is a great question. In the United States, we pride ourselves that our colleges are global experiences. So that means you're studying with students from around the world. So universities are very receptive to students from every country. In fact, they all cherish and learn from different cultures of things that go on. So I think it's a very, very positive statement. Okay.
And for students who are interested in studying in the United States, what is the admission process like? What's necessary to have in the curriculum? Do you need to have any specific skills?
So that's a great question, actually. The application process to an American university or college is very different than what you find in Brazil. In Brazil, it's basically made off of the NA test. You take that test, it dictates what school you get into. The United States is very different. They want to know a lot about you. So there's a whole application that you actually complete online. And it's going to want to know about you and your family, where you live. Then it wants to know about your school. What classes did you take? What are your grades? Grades are probably the most important thing on an American application. How did you do in your classes in 9th grade, year 1, year 2, and year 3? Then it wants to know, what do you do outside of the classroom? Do you have hobbies? Do you play sports? Are you in the arts? What is it that you do that is different than a normal classroom? We also have a couple tests. One's called the SAT test, and it's a test of a measurement of math and language skills. And language, I mean by language writing and things like that. Those tests are a good indication of how you're doing in an American college. We also will probably have you take TOEFL, some sort of a test that shows that you have mastered the English language, because that's important, obviously, since you're going to an English-speaking school. Then they're going to want to know, what do your teachers think? What kinds of letters can your teachers produce? A couple, 2 or 3. And they're not necessarily long letters. They're just talking about what you were like in the classroom. And then finally, they will have a personal statement, or think of it like an essay. It's about 600 words. And that 600 words is talking about you as a person. It's something that doesn't show up on your application. So it might be how you're thinking of something. What do you believe in? What would you like to do differently? So those are essays. So those are all the parts of it. It's a lot of information, and it takes you some time to put it together.
Yes, definitely.
For sure.
How can you get a scholarship for universities in the US?
You know, I think that's probably the #1 question that students ask me in Brazil. How do I afford this? Okay, so in every university, there is something called the financial aid office. They're kind of like the money people. And in the financial aid, they have a couple different areas you can go into. One area is what they call loans. And so they may offer, the university may offer you as a student a loan that you pay back after you graduate from school. And the other source is called scholarships. Scholarships are not paid back. They are one-time gifts to you that can last multiple years. They might have some conditions with it. And they come into a couple different flavors also. One of those flavors is academics. And that's probably the most popular ones. So your merit is what we would call it, based upon your grades and your SAT scores. The university might automatically offer you money, because on your application, you might have checked off, yes, I want to know about financial aid, and they might offer you money because they say, hey, we want this student there. There are other scholarships that you apply to that are based in the university, and they give you a list saying you can apply for these scholarships. And then there's another group of scholarships that are not university-based. They're based upon organizations around the country. And they support international students as well as national students, and you can apply for them as well. So it's important to understand how it works, and that's something that we like to do with our program, is help you figure out how to pay for it, because it can take some doing.
So completing the question of Pietro, what do you think is the probability of a student to get accepted to get a scholarship, like for a college to agree to give the student a scholarship?
All right, so let's ask a couple different answers to that question. Let's look at the fact of, first of all, how likely is it that Brazilian students will be accepted to American colleges, okay? So the acceptance process is, again, based on grades. But I've worked with students who have average grades, and they've gotten into very fine universities. I had a student just recently who had about an average grade, a 2.5, which we would call a GPA. He was accepted not only to Oklahoma State University, which is very fine, but he is actually now a freshman at Fresno State University in Fresno, California. So there is something for everybody in terms of grades, all right? Now, everyone always thinks that they need to go to Ivy League schools and things like that. They're looking for the perfect students, all right? But understand there are so many other alternatives. Now, let's go back to scholarships. How likely are those students to get scholarships? I mentioned to you already that they are based upon academics many times, but I didn't mention to you they're also based on athletics. There are some other athletic scholarships that might help you. But the third criteria is actually needs-based. Let's imagine you have good grades, but financially it's just as out of league. There are many colleges that are very receptive to giving you scholarships because of needs-based. Colleges like to appeal to all economic walks of life. Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is it possible to work in the United States with a student's visa?
That's a great question. So as someone who attended school at the University of Colorado for 4 years, I did have a job for 3 of those 4 years, all right? I needed that job because I wanted to have a little extra money. I ended up having this girlfriend, and I needed to take her out and so forth, and as it turns out, it was a good investment because we've been married almost 50 years, all right? So that was really important. But yes, schools have programs for international students to get jobs on campus. Most of the times they're on campus. And they actually have a jobs office within the international office that will help place you in different jobs. Think of it, universities are like companies. They have all walks of things that have to be done. If you're technology driven, they have big data centers that need to have operations in there. If you're into food service, they need to have waiters. I was a waiter for 3 years, okay? So they have jobs for international students. It can also even be giving guides and tours. They also, in the dorms, so each dorm, which is typically where you live as a freshman, each floor, or however they're organized, has someone that's called a resident advisor. That's someone who can help the students. So typically your second year, you could qualify to be a resident advisor as well, which covers your room. So you have free room and board. Okay?
Okay.
Would you give any tips for someone who wants to study abroad?
My number one suggestion is going to be grades. I've said that already a few times, but I'm consistent on that. 9th grade all the way through the rest of high school, grades are the most important. The other thing is start early. So when do you think about this? Year 1 students, typically, I like to talk to them at least once just to get an idea and get a feel and send them on their way. Year 2 is kind of an active time. That's when we're narrowing down to maybe your top 20 choices, looking at what each of those schools are going to require for you. So it's good to know up front, what is it they're looking for? Can you make adjustments in your schedule to look for something that they're looking for? Okay. Year 3, really, in the middle of your year 3, in August of your year 3 is when you're doing the applications. August, September, October. So what's important is to know, what does the school look at? We have 5,000 schools. They each get to set their own criteria. So up front, you want to know kind of what's important to the school. You want to know when the application deadline is, because you never want to miss a deadline. I had a student who missed the deadline by 5 minutes. They didn't care. Okay, she missed the deadline. So you want to know all those things. So I think knowing up front what you're doing is critical in getting you going on this journey. I like to think of it as a journey. Okay?
I wanted to know, if a student doesn't want to live on campus, does the price differ? Does it change?
This is a great question. Where do you live as a student?
for example, I'm going to study abroad in the USA.
Yeah.
And my whole family is going with me, and we have a house there. So I can stay there and go to the university without actually staying in the dorm. So do the prices differ there? Do they change?
Great question. All right, there's a lot of parts to that question. So first of all, let's talk about typically where most students live. All right, most students their freshman year live on dorms. Not all of them. They can live off campus as well. All right, some universities require you live on campus, but that's rare. Mostly they're flexible. So these dorms are, some of them are high-rise, some of them can be small apartments, some of them can be rooms that you share with another person. There's all different formats on that. So the dorms is most common. You eat in an eating hall. All right, so think of it as a giant restaurant with all different sections. You can have Italian one night, Mexican one night, whatever you want to, barbecue one night, okay, and so forth. But students can live off of campus as well. If your family owns a home and they're living there, you're more than welcome to be there. You commute, all right? So that's fine. There's no problem with that at all. So it does save you a lot of money because the parts that you pay for in an American school is first tuition and fees. Those are things that the university is charging for them. You have to pay those, okay? That's tuition and fees. The second part is room and board. Room and board can be, I've seen it range from $10,000 US a year to $22,000 a year. You would not have that on your bill if you're not living on campus, okay?
I understand, thank you.
To get the green card, do you have any professions that help us that is easier to get it?
Green cards. Green cards are basically saying you're an American citizen. It's a process that takes a couple of years, I believe, to get it. Usually green cards are sponsored by a company, and so usually it's for a family, for a husband or a father or a mother getting it. Yes, they do look for unique skills that will help you, but really it's up to what the company needs. So it's a wide range. I've seen, obviously, because where we are, I've seen a lot of people who are big in the automotive industry. And so they have gone to different automotive cities in the United States where cars are made. So I've seen that. I think anything in the sciences is in demand because that's very in demand in the United States. I also look at engineering skills. Those are very popular as well. So green cards can be assisted with, in terms of professions, but a lot of it is based upon the company that's bringing you there.
Okay, thank you.
Which universities would you recommend to someone who's applying as an international student?
That is a funny question because it's really hard to answer which of the 5,000 universities are the right. All right, but this is what I do. I do a little Google search and I say, which are the best universities for international students? What I look for when I look at a university is the international population. They'll always say where the students are coming from. If I see 10%, then I know I'm in a good university. They have all the resources that they need for international students, including a good international office. But you have all the popular ones. In the Northeast, any of the Ivy League schools, NYU, Boston College, anything there. In the South, you have anything from University of Florida, University of Georgia, University of Tennessee, University of Alabama, the larger schools, okay? They're all in there. So you actually have, I wouldn't even say pockets. I'm almost saying every school. But look for a 10% international student population, and you're on the right road.
Do you have any tips for someone who's preparing for the SATs and like the difficulty of the test?
So the SAT is our measurement, as I said already, for math and language arts in there. The biggest challenge Brazilian students have is time management. You have only so much time and you have a lot of questions. You have to figure out how much time you should spend. But how do I figure this out? Well, I like to direct students to Khan Academy. So KAHN academy.com. They are a free resource that actually has a whole SAT preparation program. So they take you through practice tests. They have a bunch of videos from students saying, this is what I had to do to get ready for it. I think that is the single best resource I've seen, and I send students there. Practice test, practice test, practice test. Now, the other thing to know about the SAT is you can take it more than once, all right? And some schools let you take the highest scores. So if you get 1 score in math and 1 score in language arts, and then the next time you have different scores, you can take the highest of those. It's called super scoring, so it lets you do that as well. So you want to find out if the schools do that. So you can take it as many times as you want to within a calendar year too, and then the grades are reported. The last thing to let you know is schools come in 3 flavors. Some of them are test required. You must take the SAT, okay? Seconds are test optional. You can take it, but you don't have to report it, okay? Last is test free, meaning you can take it, but I'm not going to look at it, okay? So we have those, and that's something else you want to look at beforehand.
Okay.
The recommendations letter, how can be elaborated, draw up, yeah.
So how do they work?
Yeah.
Okay. So recommendation letters, you're asking 2 or 3 people. It doesn't have to be teachers. It has to be people that know you. It cannot be family members, all right? One of the things that we do is we send you samples of what they look like. And the samples we send are both in English and in Portuguese, okay? So that helps out there. The application, so most commonly people will be using something called the Common App, which allows them to type the information once and send it to multiple schools. But all schools work the same way. They will ask you on the application, who would you like to have do a recommendation letter? That person is then sent an email from the university, from the website, and it says, this person has asked for you to do a recommendation letter. Will you do it? You say yes, they send you instructions. The best way for them to do it is to type it in like a Word document or a Google Doc. When they get the instructions, they're going to find out all they have to do is upload that document and it's in place, all right? It's a fairly simple process that you have. Do you necessarily get to see what they do? Not always. It's up to the person who wrote it, whether they want to share it or not. And in fact, that's one of the questions on the application is what happens if you're not allowed to see the recommendation letter? And you say, that's fine. All right, 10 to 1, you're going to see it anyway. You're not going to ask someone who doesn't like you.
I'm changing a bit the subject, but how long of an exchange would you recommend?
So it's been asked me a lot this last visit, this last week and a half, about exchange programs. Do I encourage them? Yes, I definitely encourage them. Now, I personally kind of like at least a semester, if not a whole year. You really get into what is it like living in the United States. And many of the students I've talked to in the last week and a half, they've been there for the whole year. I like it that they go for what I would call year 2, which I will call in the U.S. junior year. All right, I think that's a good time. You're not there for the senior year. You might be there for part of the senior year, but I think that's a good time to go. Gives you a chance to come back here also, finish up your school as well. So I love exchange programs. I have actually hosted exchange students at our house before, and they are always entertaining, and you always learn about the culture, and I loved it.
Do American universities accept certificates that aren't too recent?
So in terms of certificates, you mean courses you've taken that you've gotten certificates for?
Yes, to prove your English level.
Okay. So are there time limits on the certificates that you get?
No, there is no validity.
Yeah, they don't really, they look at see when you took it. You know, if you took it like when you were in 6th grade, they probably don't like that. Okay, but most of them want to see things from 8th grade forward. 9th grade to year 3 is actually the most important. So there's not a time expiration on those as well.
Okay, thank you.
For us that do the high school in Brazil, how can we choose the university?
How do I find the right university to go to? Okay, that is a hard one. So first of all, there are several websites that are free that allow you to do a search for schools. So they will ask you a bunch of questions. They're going to say, what do you want to study? Do you have a particular area of the country you want to look at? Do you like big schools? Do you like small schools? Do you like warm weather? Do you like cold weather? Most Brazilians don't like cold weather. All right. What do you like to do in terms of hobbies and so forth? How much do you have for a budget? So it asks you over and over questions. The more answers you give it, the more your list is going to be. It then searches through all 5,000 schools, and it produces a list for you that says, according to your answers, here are schools that meet your criteria. So then we start looking at those, all right? And we start to say yes, yes, no, no, and so forth. At the same time, if you happen to know what your major is, I do Google searches. What is the best university in the US to study economics, pre-medicine, pre-law, or what have you? And I'll get several websites that will produce lists for me. I look at multiple websites, never just one. And so I'll sort of compare those two documents that I have. Then we have conversations. I like to talk to you about the list. I like to talk to you about what the schools are, and I will give you my honest opinion. I worked on one last night with a student, and of the 20 schools he had on his list, I rated them 1, I like these, 2, they're okay, 3, not my favorite. Okay? So I try to help you with that.
Which documents most universities would require?
Okay, they will require a transcript, which is a list of your courses and your grades, something that deals with your school. They will require your SAT grades, which are reported by the SAT to the university as well. They will require the documents you need for a visa. Many times they have staffs on board to help you with those visas to make sure that they get done as well. They will require a passport, all right, to show that you can travel to the United States, and then they'll help you get the visas there. They will require financial proof from your parents, how they plan to pay for it. Even if you're going after scholarships, they want to kind of have a plan in place, so they will want to know that as well. Those are basically the major documents. Some people ask me, well, you know, if I list my extracurricular activities, how do they know whether they're true or not? Well, it's something called faith. You know, we are believing that what you are writing is true. If they find out it's not, definitely you will not be admitted anyplace. All right, so we count on that.
Thank you.
No, thank you. You guys want to know anything about US or anything?
I think.
Thank you for watching. Bye.
Thank you guys. It was wonderful.